All right, that should be better. You should be able to hear me now. So thank you, Sika Villa, even though I think you're my neighbor. Um, but yes, I was on mute. This is a random stream because it's one I've been talking about for a while now and one that some folks have been asking for. So this is to talk about the DarkNet Marketplace Bible. This is going to be a multi-part stream. Sound came back. Good. Thank you, Luan. This screen looks terrible right now. Thank you. I'm going to just introduce a bit of the DarkNet Marketplace Bible because it's something that a lot of folks have been asking me to do a stream on. I've been promising it for a while. This is going to be a multi-part stream. Like I said, there's no way to get through the entire document in one single session, but we'll see where we get through just like in the next 30 minutes or so, because it's already getting kind of late here and I was fighting Mac permission issues and StreamYard did an update and just caused all sorts of problems. So anyway, let me get going here. I'm going to bring up the browser first, and we're just going to jump straight to the Bible itself, the Marketplace Bible, not the Bible. Tor browser update. Give it a moment here. All right. So let's see if I'm even connected to the DarkNet right now. Give it a moment. All right, we are in. Let me make this larger, increase the font. All right, so let me start from the beginning again. So the DarkNet Marketplace Buyer's Bible. Why would I want to talk about this thing? It is actually a very well-written OpSec guide, so operational security guide, for those who want to understand more about anonymity, more about cryptography, more about criminal aspects of the darknet and the various marketplaces there and the types of places that people go. As I'm sure you're all familiar with, at least at a surface level, there's all kinds of things happening on the dark web, whatever you want to call it. Darknet, dark web, same thing, right? So I would say that it being the dark web, first got some notoriety was when the Silk Road DarkNet Marketplace got shut down, because for years, or at least a short number of years, it was a infamous place for sales of narcotics as well as other illicit items that are illegal to purchase, at least via this vehicle. So I would say that it's most known, it being the dark web, most known for, sadly, the purchasing of drugs, of drug paraphernalia, of weapons, of hack tools, of stolen articles, all kinds of different things. These marketplaces, there used to be a lot of different ones, I would say, and by different ones, I mean ones that were servicing different types of things that could be purchased. But if you look at the marketplaces today, the majority of them are primarily focused on selling narcotics. But those of you who are familiar with the dark web, the Onion extension is the website extension. Like, you normally go to a .com site or a .net site on the ClearNet, but on the dark web, you go to .onion sites. And if you're not connected through Tor, through a Tor browser into the Tor network, you're unable to access what I would say is like the DNS that allows you to get to these .onion extensions. A lot of these .onion websites, they're only alive for a short period of time, and that's to make it difficult to cover, to determine who they are or when it came to be and all that good stuff. There are some well-known places that people go to for reliable links to get to these various onion sites, depending on what types of onion sites they are. So there are the marketplace onions. Of course, they want you to be able to find those, because then you can go and sign up for an account if you're a buyer, and you can look through the store and you can buy things. If you're a seller, of course, you need to get to those onion sites to be able to add items and look at your customers and all that good stuff. But of course, there are a lot of other onion sites out there that so I'm thinking, taking a step back, so Telegram is pretty much a horrible platform. And I say horrible platform because most of the activities that are done on Telegram are often illegal. anything from CP, I don't define that, but you know what I mean when I say CP, as well as people selling breach data, people advertising other things that just typically are often criminal. So a lot of times you will on Telegram get links that are onion links, but it's kind of all over the place. So I want to kind of stay focused on this Bible here. There is a website called Dread that is on the dark web, and it's kind of like the Reddit of the ClearNet, of the internet, when you go to Reddit for the dark web. Again, it's called Dread. And oftentimes these different websites get shut down due to various hacktivists or government entities or even marketplaces attacking other marketplaces. So it's not as reliable typically to get to these onion sites, depending on what time and when and where and who, what it is you're visiting. So the Marketplace Bible, which is the whole purpose of this stream series that I want to do, that I've been promising for a while. Again, this is an OpSec guide put together by a group of people that mostly are anonymous, because obviously most people who operate on the dark web don't want to get doxxed and they would like to keep their anonymity. Keeping anonymity is actually quite difficult, and it's very easy to make a mistake. There was a DarkNet marketplace called Incognito, where it had operated for a number of years. I don't think too many years, but a number of years. And the individual behind it, named Pharaoh, that was, of course, his handle. I believe he was from Taiwan. He was arrested about a year ago now. So mid 2014, wow, 2024, he was arrested and apprehended at an airport. I think it was New York. But he was the owner and operator of the Incognito Marketplace, which was primarily dealing with the sales of narcotics. And how typically the darknet marketplaces work is that someone who is relatively savvy when it comes to encryption and privacy and anonymity will create a marketplace, and they'll have it hosted in a country or locations where the extradition laws and other laws are relatively weak in comparison to countries like the United States and England and others. And they typically have to kind of earn credibility and earn the trust of the community. And by community in this case, I'm talking about the community of people wanting to sell things that are illegal to sell. And those operate, of course, all around the world. There are typically, a dozen, 24 marketplaces that are available or accessible at any point in time. They often come to life. They often get shut down. There's often exit scams and rug pulls that are performed. In the case of Incognito, I may misquote things, but you can go look it up if you Google it or look on a chat bot. Pharaoh and the Incognito Marketplace, the individual who operated and owned that, he had to earn trust by the community to make it so sellers want to actually sell on that particular marketplace, because again, this is all criminal activity for the most part. So in order to gain a customer base and a seller base, you have to earn their trust. So Dread actually ends up being one of the primary places that they would need to earn that trust. And how do you earn that trust? Obviously, if you have a history, if you've been a seller for a while and you've got validation, how's that validation done? Typically through cryptography. We'll talk a little bit about that when we get to that section as well. But it can be challenging, right? You're trying to win over the trust of people who don't want to be arrested and don't want to get caught. So once you're able to do that, which the Incognito Marketplace owner was able to do, he would charge a fee to be able to open up a store. And if you're not familiar at all with the marketplace, at some point, if not today in this series, I will go to a marketplace so you can see what it looks like. Hopefully YouTube doesn't strike the video. I have no idea what their policies are around this kind of stuff, but we'll see what happens. But you would have it where you think about going to eBay. You go to eBay, people have eBay stores, or Amazon. You've got Amazon stores. Like, people can have their own little storefronts, and they can have a bunch of items that they're going to sell through that store. Now, obviously, in most cases, these are all legal things, but on the darknet, this is illegal things. So you've got to earn that trust. And then, so if somebody decides to pay you, in the case of Incognito, Pharaoh, the guy, to allow them to open up a store, they get their storefront, and then they can go ahead and post different items that they want to to make for sale. For, again, Incognito and a lot of these other ones like White House Market and Silk Road and others that have come and gone over the years, these are often just different types of drugs. It's not limited to that, though. Oftentimes you'll see things like hack tools. You'll see things like just items where software has been compromised, where the DRM has been compromised and someone's cracked the software and they're going to sell it to you. There are counterfeit money that's available to buy. I've seen weapons and things like that available to buy. You have to imagine there's a lot of scammers out there as well who are willing to sell things to you, and of course you're not going to get it. But all that stuff's available. You'll hear people say, "Oh, you can even hire a hitman on the dark web." I personally have not seen that specifically on the dark web. I've seen it on Telegram and I've heard of it being on the dark web, but you have to manage that the feds, so law enforcement, are probably behind a large number of those types of offers or opportunities. So 9 times out of 10, if somebody's saying, "Hey, hire a hitman to go and take out, your better half," then it's probably not real. You're probably going to get caught, and I hope you do if you do decide to do that. But those types of things are potentially available as well as, of course, CP. I'm not going to define that, but you know what I mean. I'm not going to talk about that aspect of the dark web. So how the dark webs typically, or the marketplaces typically work, is that once you get these sellers who trust you and they sign up for accounts and they allow you to create the storefronts, then obviously you have to allow the customers to join. And so the customers join, they want to be able to navigate the different storefronts and decide if they want to buy something or not. And how it typically works is same thing with Reddit, as I mentioned earlier, or eBay, any of these sites, the Yelp. When you think about Yelp, most people go to that website to actually complain about something, right? It's less often that someone goes to a site to give a compliment to a service that they received versus if they're upset about something and they want to leave a negative review. It's very similar on these stores where they want to get a high rating. So let's say it's a 5-star rating is the maximum. They want to get that 5-star rating, just like on Uber or Lyft. And the way they do that is by obviously sending to the buyers of whatever products they're offering what they asked for, what they purchased. And then once that individual receives that item and it's what it's supposed to be, you're hoping that they go up and leave you a positive review. Same thing though with the negative side. If you send them something that's not what they ordered or something else happened, then they're going to leave you a negative review. So all this stuff happens. There's how it often works as well, or typically works, is that there is escrow involved. So I would say in today's landscape, less people are using Bitcoin due to its traceability and tracking versus a cryptocurrency like Monero, which we'll talk about too as we go through the guide. So again, I'm just giving a high level kind of summary of what this Bible is for and the types of people who go and read through it to hopefully not get caught and get arrested doing illicit activity. I will say it again, I am not advocating anything illicit here. I simply am going through this as it is a well-compiled OpSec guide that is applicable to anywhere in cybersecurity. It talks about cryptography. It talks about covering your tracks. It talks about many of the things that we as offensive people or defenders working in the ethical realm are interested in. So it's good to have the understanding. One of the reasons I decided to do this is I've gotten a lot of requests from just different law enforcement entities around the world. I was just in Australia a couple weeks ago and visiting with various intelligence agencies there. Not long before that, I was in England and the UK and dealing or working with different intelligence agencies there. So it's definitely something of interest to law enforcement. In fact, at the SANS Institute, where of course I'm the offensive operations curriculum lead, when crypto started to blow up some years ago and NFT started to blow up, blockchain, smart contract security, like Solidity, all that stuff started to come out, we actually put together a course. I work with a good friend of mine, Steve, from Halborn, which is a boutique crypto kind of services company from the security side. And I would say that the majority of students attending that course were working in law enforcement to some capacity. So it just shows you kind of the audience of folks who are interested in this kind of stuff. And that's why I'm doing this. So just my last time saying it, I am not advocating the use of this Bible here or this stream or streams that I'm going to be doing for illicit activities, but it is a great OpSec guide. But back to what I was saying before. So if a buyer wants to go and purchase, let's say $1,000 in some illegal items from you, they want some security blanket. They want to know that you can't just go and run off with their money. So what happens is these marketplaces are supposed to have an escrow service. And I think this is something a lot of people or some people don't understand, which is understandable because not many people are going to buy things across the dark web. But that escrow is typically nothing more than a wallet, a crypto wallet, whether it be Bitcoin or Monero or something else, that is owned by the marketplace owner. It's not owned by the seller. So there might be 500 sellers on a specific marketplace, but the wallet that's serving as the escrow is owned and controlled by the owner of the entire marketplace. So everybody is trusting this individual or individuals who own that marketplace when it comes to escrow. So how it would typically work is if I wanted to buy something, I would go onto this marketplace. The CAPTCHAs are typically pretty intense, a lot of machine learning and stuff involved in some cases, but obviously it's all about. So why are the CAPTCHAs so strong? I'll say the CAPTCHAs are typically strong because a lot of the marketplaces will attack other marketplaces to try to knock them offline, to force customers to go to them to get the products they want to buy. So it may be marketplaces attacking marketplaces. It may be hacktivists who are against the types of things that you're selling. It may be law enforcement or other groups trying to take down and do a denial of service against your marketplace to knock it offline so that people are forced to go to another marketplace. This is why a lot of the marketplaces will actually create custom onion domains or sites that you visit, and it's just one for you as a customer, but it's something that's going to be short-lived, again, because the longer something stays online and available, the more likely it is to track what's going on, or if you're going to do a denial of service, the more likely you're going to be able to go and impact that particular onion site. So there's so much to this. You'll see my brain bouncing around a lot because I learned a lot from the course that's my friend Steve wrote from Halborn. It was a 5-day course on stuff like this. We also at SANS have a HumInt course on the forensic side, which is all about, again, HumInt and doxing and just how all of this works, and OpSec in general, and OSINT in general, but specifically to the dark web. So it's quite a fascinating area. But let's go back to the whole escrow thing. So let's say that I want to buy $1,000 in products from a particular seller. I would go into their storefront. I would, just like on a regular store on the internet, I would add the number of items to my cart and I would go to checkout. When you go to checkout, then of course it's going to give you a wallet address for you to send your funds to. Now, obviously, there needs to be tracking associated with who sends what money to these wallet addresses. So every seller on a marketplace, as well as every buyer on a marketplace, is most likely going to have their own wallet address associated with the cryptocurrency that they're using. So that way it's trackable or traceable, so we know how much money was sent to which account. But all of that is controlled by the master wallet. You know, if you've ever worked with a crypto wallet before in any cryptocurrency, you can generate as many wallets as you want, or sorry, addresses as you want that are associated with your wallet. So even though you have your initial wallet address, you can just generate as many as you want. And if you wanted to, you could say, well, that customer, I want them to use this wallet. That one, I want them to use that wallet. And that's, again, how it's traced. So you send your money, let's say it's $1,000 in crypto, to this wallet that falls under the wallet owner of the marketplace. And then that, I imagine, would tip off or alert the seller that a purchase was made. So the seller now knows that this particular individual who has an account on the marketplace has purchased an item. And then the seller knows that they can then go and send that item to the buyer. The money is held in escrow until the recipient receives that and they say, I got my product and I'm signing off. Or I imagine that there's a timeout associated with it as well, because what happens if the person never says that they received the product? So lots of things can happen there, and there's different ways that they can be done. So you would hope at that point that the funds that were paid by the buyer would get released to the seller so that they get their money and they continue onward. And of course, the escrow, the marketplace owner, is taking a commission off of this. Where did I get all this info? From the incognito filings and on the law enforcement data that is publicly available. It's actually the law enforcement agencies like the DEA and others are very, and the FBI and all, they're very proud, of course, when they are able to bust these marketplaces and take them down. So they put a lot of details up as to how they went about with going through their investigation and getting the arrest or whatever they're trying to do. So if the seller gets it, okay, great, they send it to you, you got it, and you can imagine, like, that's just basic internet store sales at that point. And the thing is, we're dealing with something that's very, illicit, illegal, secretive. Nobody wants to get caught. So let's go back to the incognito example, because this is an important thing just in general to understand about cryptography, which is they claimed, Pharaoh, again, I think that's the name he went by, out of Taiwan, Pharaoh claimed that if you go onto your account on the incognito website and you enter in a message, and that message, I would imagine, would include your mailing address, right? You have to tell the sender, the seller, where to send the product. So you go in and you type in your address, and they said on there that they would encrypt the data for you if you didn't want to encrypt it yourself. So we'll talk about, when we get to the section on the left called PGP, Pretty Good Privacy. That and GPG, GNU Privacy Guard, are typically the encryption tools that are used, where, if you're not familiar with cryptography, it's a two-key crypto system, asymmetric key cryptography. There's a public and private key pair associated with each user's account. Let's just pretend they have one account. So I would have a private key that I never share with anybody, and I would have a public key that I will share with people. Because how it works from a high level, I know some of you are hearing this and like, yeah, I know how cryptography works, but some people watching this may not know. So how it works is we've got the public-private key pair that we generate, and I'll show you this when we get to that section in PGP. We'll create a key pair and all that stuff. We'll go into a store, we'll see what it looks like. Maybe not in this stream, I don't know how far we'll go here, but we'll see. So I will share my public key, and that public key has a relationship with the private key. If you were to encrypt something with the public key that I gave you, the only key that can decrypt it is my private key. So even if 100,000 people have my public key and something's encrypted with that public key, you can't decrypt it. The only key that can decrypt it is my private key. So as long as I protect my private key, no one can read a message that was sent to me. Now, I know some of you might be thinking about, what about post-quantum cryptography issues? Yeah, quantum cryptography does threaten asymmetric key cryptography more than symmetric key cryptography. That's a conversation for another time, but we're not quite there yet. I think the NSA is expecting a proper quantum computing farm by like 2030, but that is going to be a problem in a number of years. Right now, it's just like academic research and stuff that have access. Those things are very noisy and expensive. So back to the point, if I want to send my address to a seller so that they can mail me something that I've purchased through a marketplace, I need to give them my public key. They will encrypt the message with my public key to send correspondence to me, which of course means if I want to give them my address, I need to encrypt my address with their public key, because the only key that could decrypt that would be their private key. This is a whole big system of trust, a web of trust. There's no certificate authority like we have and expect through Entrust and RSA on the internet. We're on the DarkNet now. We can't really trust anything. This is why it would not be a good idea to assume that a marketplace is going to encrypt for you if you want to be lazy. Because typically what you would do is you would upload your public key to these marketplaces, to websites like Dread, so that if somebody wants to send you a message, they would encrypt that data with your public key, knowing that only you with the private key can decrypt it. That assumes that your private key has not been compromised. And the other way around, if I'm buying something in a marketplace, I need to encrypt my mailing address with the public key of the seller. And then only the seller should be able to decrypt that, because they should be the only ones with the private key that's associated with their public key. Now, obviously, if any of this is broken, the whole thing falls apart, right? So what people failed to do with the incognito example is, yes, they uploaded their public key to the website. The sellers uploaded their public key to the website. And if I were to go buy something, I had an option. So let's say I add something to my cart and I check out and I want to pay the cryptocurrency, and then I need to type in my mailing address so that the seller can send it to me. They had an option that said, go ahead and type your mailing address here in the web page and click send, and we'll encrypt it for you using the private key that you uploaded to our website. Well, guess what they came out and said once this whole thing fell apart in the marketplace and they realized law enforcement was onto them? They decided to extort the sellers and the buyers, and they said, hey, remember when we told you that we were encrypting traffic on your behalf? Well, guess what? We weren't. And if you don't want us to give all of those messages, which are not encrypted, to law enforcement, you need to pay us some thousands of dollars. And they actually made a lot of money doing that. But thankfully, this individual got arrested and he is in a federal prison now, likely serving a life sentence. I haven't tracked the latest on that one. But my point there, and the whole point of this webcast series, is OpSec. Do not assume that a website in that type of situation, or any situation, is going to do the right thing and encrypt your data the way that they say they're going to. It takes 2 seconds longer to bring up GNU Privacy Guard or PGP, whatever you're using, and encrypt your message with the public key of the recipient. And then you copy and paste the encrypted data into the submission form and you hit send then. Because then you're not at risk of this entity in the middle having screwed you over, right? So now, obviously, there's still a risk where you're assuming that the recipient's private key has not been compromised, but it's less of a risk than an intermediary who was promising to do something that they didn't. Cryptography is one of my favorite things to talk about because it's something that is developers often just don't do right. If you go back to Microsoft's security development lifecycle, one of the things that they introduced by mapping security into the design phase of the development lifecycle is secure cryptographic design, to use well-known and trusted cryptographic libraries and solutions, as opposed to trying to do security by obscurity and writing your own encryption algorithm or implementing your own crypto system. So it's a common problem that people just don't understand cryptography enough to make good decisions. And it could be something as simple as block cipher modes. There's stream ciphers and there's block ciphers when you talk about symmetric key cryptography. Well, stream ciphers typically come with something called an initialization vector, which adds entropy, it adds uniqueness into the key, into the encryption. Block ciphers, there's different modes, and depending on the mode, they may or may not do that. So if somebody's using something like ECB mode, then your data is not encrypted. like the way it should be. There is no entropy. There's no initialization vector that's improving things. And ECB stands for electronic code book, if you're interested. So that was my long-winded intro as to why I want to walk through this document. I haven't even looked, I can't on my screen, I can't see the comments or anything. So if you've said something and I haven't replied, my apologies. On my screen right now is the DarkNet Marketplace Bible, just in the way I've got this set up right now and the way that this browser was giving me trouble. So I know it's already been quite some time, but let's look through this, okay? Let's get jumping in here. So hello, welcome to the DarkNet Marketplace Bible for buyers. I'm not going to read all this, of course, but it says we want you to be able to order and buy securely from DarkNet markets. It orients itself on OpSec best practices. Again, that is why I'm focusing on these sessions, because I think it's a really good and well-written OpSec guide for anybody who's interested in cryptography and security. And of course, from a law enforcement perspective, I will be sharing a lot of information that I think will be helpful to you when it comes to these sections that we'll go through. There's different operating systems out there that people like to use, like Tails is one of them. Whonix is another. You don't have to use those, but it's highly encouraged that if you do want to be anonymous, that you do this. There's other big questions around, like, should I use VPN or should I not use VPN when connecting into the dark web? That's like a divisive and subjective area. I lean one way, but I'll explain to you arguments on both sides as to why some people think that using VPN is better and why some people think VPN is not the right choice. So Monero, PGP, Tails, just telling you about things it's going to talk about. DNMs and buying from DNMs is not for everyone. If you have little computer experience and are not willing to invest much time, you should stick to real life sources. That's actually a really good point, because you probably heard that saying, like, I'm not even going to get it right, but it's something like a little bit of knowledge is dangerous or something, right? Again, I screwed that up, but you get my point. It's easy to make a mistake. And even somebody like, and no, I would never do it. If I were going to start a dark web marketplace, I would, you would need to be extremely careful. Take the example of Incognito. This individual made millions and millions and millions of dollars as an early 20-year-old individual, early 20s. And he ended up making some really dumb OpSec mistakes. Why? Because people get lazy, because people get complacent. People think, oh, I've been doing this for a long time, no one's caught me. And they start to forget that one simple little mistake is all it takes to dox you, or to be able to allow someone to be able to figure out who you are. And it could be something as simple as, I used a Xbox Live gamer tag 15 years ago to play Halo, and I ended up using that same handle on the Dread website on the dark web. You just gave yourself up right there. Like, all it takes is one little mistake. And in fact, the individual from Incognito, one of the many dumb mistakes that he made is that he was logged into his Google account and he was checking things that he shouldn't have been checking. We'll talk more about that later. Again, this is going to be a multi-part series, but that was a really stupid mistake if you're someone who is doing this horrible criminal activity. And I say horrible because these marketplaces, there were over 100,000 deaths due to overdoses of fentanyl in the United States alone in 2024. Where do you think a large number of this movement of narcotics is occurring? You can go into a marketplace and you can buy 100,000 fentanyl-laced pills for a very cheap amount of money, because it's all coming from China through Mexico and other places. And then that individual has mules or drug dealers who go on the street to sell this stuff, and people are dying. So I am absolutely against the sales of this type of stuff on the dark web, because it's killing people, right? So there's a lot to this. Let's keep going here. If you're willing to learn, it says, so right here, this /D right there, that's saying Dread. Dread is, again, a website like Reddit. There's all kinds of forums there. I will show you that at some point if you haven't seen it before, and we'll take a look at what types of things are there. There's hacking pages, there's drug pages, there's all kinds of weird pages there. But Dread is a website, and they've got a specific section on DarkNet Market noobs to try to help answer questions for people who are just getting into this sort of thing. You have to imagine that the majority of time law enforcement is able to make an arrest and identify the marketplace owners or the sellers or even the buyers of these these transactions and such. It's due to dumb mistakes. If you do have perfect OpSec hygiene, like you're really, really good at it, it's nearly impossible for someone to figure out who you are. But you have to be extremely you have to go by the book, and you can't ever deviate from it. One mistake is all it takes to get you caught. Now, obviously, again, I do not want this series to sound like I'm trying to help people wanting to do bad things. I want this to be things to help those who want to do good things and law enforcement and all that kind of stuff. You can flame me if you want for that. It's fine. But obviously, it's applicable to both sides. So there are going to be times where it may sound like something I'm saying could really benefit somebody wanting to do something bad. But that's because as attackers, as hackers, as security professionals, we always need to know how the other side works, or else we can't do a good job at what we're doing. So let's click on this about link here to expand this. If it lets me. Oh, here we go. Before you start, let's see what it says. So you, right here, so you are about to read how to commit felonies and reduce the risk of getting caught. And it's telling you, don't do this on your normal operating system or your default browser. Keep your darknet activity far away from your real identity. So again, it's really trying to tell people and teach people who may not know how to do this stuff how to not get caught, which makes sense. So right here, it's talking about video tutorials. I'll just actually go back up here for a second. Reddit also attracts you across different sites and links. So this goes back to what I was saying about like using the same handle, doing anything. Like it has to be a completely separate life on the dark web in order to not be traced. And most people just aren't going to be good enough at that. And maybe they are at first, but at some point, oftentimes, more often than not, people are going to make mistakes. But it says here about the video tutorials. There are video tutorials available, but it says it is not recommended to use them. Why? OpSec, because if you're going to go watch a YouTube video, you're not going to use the Tor browser. You're going to use Google Chrome, or you're going to use Edge or Firefox, whatever, Safari, and you're going to watch that video. And you might be logged into your Google account. You might not be logged into the Google account, but all that stuff now has records, right? None of us really know what information about our IP address, about our accounts are being stored in the cloud or being stored at these companies that we visit their websites on. We have to assume the worst. So from a privacy advocate perspective, we always have to assume the worst, that anything we do can be tracked. And this goes back again to why it's so hard to stay consistent at being like secretive, because it's really inconvenient to do that. So it says you compromise your OpSec when watching these because YouTube knows you're interested in buying drugs or looking at CP or figuring out how to buy a gun or whatever else it might be. So all that stuff is pretty obvious, and this is just a really short page here. So we'll skip on. Let's talk about operating systems a little bit, because I think this is an important one. And then I might call it there because, again, I don't want these videos to be too long. This is going to be a series. You can see how much of this document we have yet to go through. And I keep yapping, so there's so much to say about it. Operating systems is a really important one because, let's say you're using Windows. It doesn't matter the operating system. Let's just pick on Windows. Telemetry. Telemetry is a thing. Even if you think you turn off all the telemetry, and if you're not familiar with the word telemetry when it comes to computers, it means just information being sent back and forth across the web between your computer and Microsoft or whoever else about things you're doing or things that are happening on your system. And some of it may be completely benign and uninteresting information, and some of it may actually be something that could potentially track you and associate you with something. When you are going to go onto the dark web, and I recommend this for people who are, I'm not going to recommend this for criminals, but I'll just say I recommend it for people who just are interested in checking things out. And let me give you an example. I think it's a good time to give an example as to why I would go onto the dark web. I'll give you a few. One, because I'm a computer security nerd and I really am interested in all aspects of it. I do vulnerability research and write exploits for a living. Well, guess what? People sell exploits, right? They're for sale. Breach data is for sale constantly. So there's a Twitter handle or X handle called Dark Web Informer. And basically they're pulling their data straight from Telegram, which again, Telegram is a cesspool. I hate Telegram, but there are some things that are worth watching there, because a lot of times if you're a company who's been breached, your first indication that you've been breached might be the fact that someone's selling your breach data on Telegram or on the dark web. So it's important from a kind of OSINT and just like defensive perspective and threat hunting perspective to go and to see, is somebody selling our breach data? Because people are breaching companies all the time and they're putting a price tag on it. Depends how much PII data is in there. Also, people are selling your Slack cookies. So Slack, nobody logs out of Slack until it makes them log back in again. So there's like $10 you can get access to some company's Slack workspace on the dark web or via Telegram or whatever. So there's a lot of reasons. Also, for me personally, like I'm an author. I write a lot of courseware. I write books, and people sell illegal copies of your intellectual property on the dark web marketplaces. I mean, there's countless reasons as why, from a security perspective, we are interested in going onto the dark web and seeing things. Law enforcement obviously has a very vested interest into going there to launch campaigns, to try to dox people and all that human stuff or whatever else. So there's a bunch of reasons for that. But again, just trying to point out that I'm advocating for good, but obviously what can be used for good can be used for evil. So whatever. The main two operating systems are Tails and Unix. They are different. There are pros and cons of each of them. So choosing one is a personal decision depending on what your goal is. I'll just give you a quick example so those of you who know what I'm talking about understand what I'm saying. If you are someone who wants to run your own Monero node, and I'll explain more about that later, but if you know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about. If you want to run your own local node, then Unix is going to be a better option for you than Tails, right? So we're going to talk about the reasons for some of that stuff. But why are these operating systems important? I just mentioned telemetry a moment ago. Telemetry is the information with or without your permission that's being sent out from your operating system across the network to other third parties. There's also open ports on your system. There's services running on your system. There's like temporary files that are stored in your system that may have sensitive information. There's all kinds of things on a default operating system that are not good for someone who wants to be super private, right? And so these operating systems do a bunch of stuff. They strip down, they do something called attack surface reduction. They reduce the attack surface. Imagine a law enforcement officer going to a call where there's a shooting. They're not going to go there without a bulletproof vest and helmet or whatever else protective gear, right? We're reducing our attack surface by doing that. Same thing on the operating system side. We're minimizing the services that need to run. We're firewalling everything. We are not storing any browser cache. We are wiping memory when we reboot. We are getting rid of temporary files that are, potentially dangerous. There's all kinds of things that these OSs are doing. There are a lot of similarities between Tails and Unix. And now you can see over on the left, it says host operating system, Tails, Unix, Cubes, Unix, mobile guide. You can connect to Tor And Tor, by the way, stands for the onion routing or onion router or whatever. The reason it's called that, like the diagram, like imagine an onion and you pull back the layers of the onion and it's like layer after layer after layer after layer. Like when you go to connect to Gmail from your house, the goal is to prefer and take the most efficient route possible to your destination from your source. So whatever the shortest number of hops, the highest bandwidth, whatever way we can get to that destination as efficiently, as quickly as possible is the route we're going to take. When you go into something like the dark web, it's intentionally designed to work differently. There are Tor entry nodes and exit nodes, and obviously you want to hide and mask your IP address so those entry and exit nodes don't know, if possible, what your IP address is, or at least not the system you're using locally, that it knows about the IP address you used when you did go into the dark web. So the routes that are taken may be more like bouncing you around all over the place between a bunch of these routers that's trying to make it really difficult to determine the origin of your computer. So by scrambling stuff and bouncing it around, the idea would be if someone was to compromise one of these routers in the Tor network, that they still wouldn't be able to easily determine and backtrace that to your local IP address. And there's a difference between Tails and Whonix about how they connect. I'm not going to click on the Tails links and the Whonix link because those are going to go into like where to download it from, how to set it up, and that's just instructions. I'll just tell you some of the high level differences between these options up here. First off, host operating system. Like I would never ever use my personal computer to directly connect into Tor. If your concern is privacy, now if you're not doing anything wrong and you're just somebody who wants to go and take a look to see if someone's stolen your intellectual property, obviously, I mean, still though, your ISP and anybody who has access to that information can see that you did connect to the dark web. If you're not doing anything wrong, then I guess there's nothing to worry about. But like in general, you would never connect from your laptop, your Windows or Mac or Linux box directly through the Tor browser and go into the dark web. It's because, well, it's a lot of reasons, but some of the obvious ones, your IP address is going to be like directly exposed to the ISP who can see that you went to these Tor entry nodes. But there's a whole series of issues. Just the point is, just don't do that in general. And that's why these operating systems were created. Now, obviously, you have the option to use a mobile device. I would never do that. I know people do, but I would never do that. Like Android, first off, that's even, I'm not going to say anything. If you know if you know, like Android to connect to the dark web, come on. iOS, I mean, iOS is typically known for being more secure in many ways, but I'm just going to leave that as that. I wouldn't use mobile to connect to the dark web. Tails and Whonix are the two primary operating systems. And again, this is subjective. So just because I'm saying this doesn't mean that this is the right way, this is gospel, and you have to listen to me. I'm sure there's people who are going to listen to this who are like, hey, that guy's an idiot, but that's fine. This is my experience, and I've done quite a bit of research on this. But Tails and Whonix, a big difference between the two, and look at the top there, it says Tails. If you're a new user or someone not very tech savvy, you should stick with using Tails. Now, I don't really agree with that, but I understand why it's being said. One of the main differences between Tails and Whonix is that Tails is a live virtual machine, typically is how people would run it. So it's running off of a USB drive. You want it to run in memory, so that it's not actually storing things on your hard drive and leaving artifacts behind so a forensics person can go and recover things. Remember the example I was saying a moment ago? I didn't complete my thought, but if I wanted to have a local Monero node, I wouldn't use Tails for that because Tails is going to delete. And now, yeah, of course, you can set up some areas that are going to be that are going to persist, but that's not recommended. Like Tails, the point of it is like you're in, you're out, and it's like wiping everything for the most part. One problem with Tails, so that's good, right? That it does that. There's no persistence, there's less artifacts left behind. Now, obviously, you can choose to encrypt these operating systems depending on how you go about it, which of course is encouraged. If you're going to be using something like Unix, at least run it from an encrypted SSD drive. It's going to make it, obviously, if you set that SSD drive encrypted safely, it's going to make it so if someone were to get access to that drive, that they're not going to be able to easily boot up your operating system and take a look inside Unix, because again, there's more persistence in Unix. But where Tails is going to shut it down right away and wipe out as much as possible. It actually wipes the RAM that was used during that duration of the session when you do shut down Tails, or at least it's supposed to. But Tails, on the negative side, is one operating system. So your IP address is not going to be protected like it would be if using Unix. Unix actually uses two systems. There's a gateway and there's a workstation. And the whole purpose of the gateway is to be like the conduit that allows the workstation to connect through it. The workstation never knows the IP address that you have because it's using network address translation, right? It's using something that is just private. It never knows your IP address. So if somebody were to compromise and get access to your Unix workstation, there's no information stored on that box about the IP address that was used that could associate you with a time and place, like from your house or a hotel. So that gateway is also configured with a lot of firewall rules, as is Tails, to make it so, again, the fingerprint's as small as possible, that only the information, but basically everything that goes into the Unix gateway has to go into Tor. Like there is no connection out to the ClearNet. So everything's tunneled into Tor. Now, one thing I'll say here at the same time, because it's something that would come up if we were to click through all this, is VPN. And this is where I'm going to stop. There is a big debate between whether or not you should use VPN before connecting into Tor or not use VPN connecting into Tor. I've listened to arguments on both sides. I understand the arguments on both sides, but here's my opinion. If you have a trustworthy VPN that you can use, and here's the concern from the people that say don't use VPN. They're going to say that you don't know if the logs are deleted. You don't know if they're storing the logs. And if they're storing the logs, then they have that direct connection to your house or wherever you're connecting from, and they know your IP address, and they know it was you that was terminating at the end of this VPN tunnel and then going straight into the dark web. But what if you utilize a VPN from a trusted entity that you know 100% are not storing logs? Then to me, that's a better option, because now your entry into the dark web is never from your home. You are using an IP address from the VPN in some other country or wherever you're connecting to. So if you know for a fact that you trust the VPN provider or the individual that owns a VPN, my personal opinion is that's a better option versus not using VPN. But some people will also say that, well, Unix is designed intentionally to work without a VPN to scramble things. But listen, that doesn't really make so much sense to me, because it's still coming from your house. Like if I'm connecting to the dark web from my house and my IP address is being used by Unix gateway, for example, or Tails, to go to a Tor entry node, my ISP still sees that, right? So wouldn't it be better to utilize an IP address that's not the one from your home? Again, this is something that's subjective and people argue about it and such, but up to you. I'm going to go ahead and stop it here. Like when we do the next one, we'll talk about password managers a bit. We'll talk about PGP and GPG. I'll show you what the application looks like and how you go about using it safely. And we'll actually use it to create an account on a DarkNet Marketplace. We'll find one. You might see some things you don't like drugs and stuff on the web page, but that's, it is what it is. But we'll create an account. I'll show you what the captchas look like. I'll show you how you want to do cryptography. and we'll get into cryptocurrencies as well on that next one. Let me actually jump back over to the screen here to see if I have any questions that I missed or if somebody's yelling at me or whatever. Sorry, the screen's ugly. Let me see here. All right. Not many questions. All right. Theo Van, not the Theo Von. No one's told me that. I don't know if that's a good thing or bad thing. All right. Deftones. Thank you. Love the Deftones. But yes, I am in a band called Dead Code, and we are actually going out on tour next month with the band Filter. So if you want to come out and check us out, please do. Let's see. Crypto tumblers. We'll talk about crypto tumblers when we get to the crypto section for sure. Yes. Yes, absolutely, Zago. Like that's what happened with Incognito. The guy literally did an exit scam. So he extorted everybody and said, "Hey, the data that we said was encrypted wasn't actually encrypted." But before he extorted people, he actually decided to exit scam, and he waited until like there's a lot of money in escrow since it's all under his wallet, and he just ran off with it. But here's the thing that led him to that. Apparently, per the report from law enforcement, he was hacked by some criminals. Like basically, the hacker got hacked, and he went to some other country in Europe, I think it was Portugal or something, and they scammed him and they stole a ton of Bitcoin or cryptocurrency from him. And so he got mad, he started to get scared, and then he decided to exit scam, and then he also extorted, but then he got arrested by the FBI and other agencies. So pretty cool stuff. Several threat intelligent platforms. I'm not clear on how you do this. Scrapers, AI combined. Yeah, that's something, Manuel. We can talk about that too coming up because that's a good point, and it's something I think that will lead into when we get into upcoming ones. Am I saying running a VPN on a separate computer or running a VM enough? I mean, honestly, the further away you can get, the better, right? The abstraction is going to help, just like my screen right now. The most important thing is to run the virtual machine from an external device that's encrypted. So an SSD that's strongly encrypted with a really strong passphrase, and you're running it from there. I mean, if you can, yeah, use it from a dummy computer, but as long as all that data is stored over there and you're wiping the RAM of your operating system, once you're done, you should be okay. Can I create a video about Unix setup? I mean, there honestly, I could, but there are definitely videos, Kush, about setting up Unix. It's not too hard. Like literally, you download the two virtual machines and you boot them with not VMware. My brain just had a shot. Oracle VirtualBox. Boot them up with VirtualBox. It like brings up two different virtual machines and they automatically talk to each other. Like the gateway is set up by default. The workstation talks to the gateway by default. Now there are operating system best practices that you want to do, of like change the password. You want to run it on an encrypted drive and stuff like that. We can talk more about it, but there are some really good videos about setting up Unix and stuff like that. Any fun dark web monitoring exploit 0 form? Most of the marketplaces have junk. Like they'll sell ransomware as a service and janky, like just crackers and like just dumb stuff. Like you never see 0 days on a dark web marketplace. I'm somebody who deals with exploit sales and brokering. Like I literally just connected to a couple of people yesterday, so some buyers. That's not typically where that happens. There are exploit acquisition companies. I've done a lot of presentations about this before, but there are exploit acquisition companies. There are obviously Telegram groups and stuff like that, but I don't like Telegram. It's dodgy. It's one of those things where if you have something that people want to buy, it's pretty easy to find buyers, and the buyers who want something and they know people who write those 0 days, like they find you. But I always tell people on Twitter, X, whatever, and on my streams and on Discord, if you ever have something and you're interested in finding a buyer, I'll help connect you to ethical buyers. I'm not interested in helping connect people to unethical buyers, but I can definitely send you on a direction to help you out. Should I use NAT or firewall like pfSense to provide DHCP IP? I mean, network address translation, think about what it's doing. It's we may only have one IP address at our house that's publicly routable, most of us only have one IP, and that's often a DHCP address. So we don't even own the IP. It's just there temporarily for a duration of time. VMware, for example, workstation, it's got DHCP built into it. So it's got NAT mode and it's got bridge mode. Obviously, bridge mode is when you're using the IP address of the host computer. NAT mode is when you are creating the RFC 1918 address allocations and giving it temporarily to a system. I mean, it all comes back to, again, like the example I was explaining with how Unix works, how the workstation never knows the IP address of the actual IP address that's being used on the gateway or the host. And that's a good thing. So I don't think it really matters necessarily who gives you the DHCP address, as long as you are in control of what it is giving the DHCP address, right? So if it's your DHCP server or if it's your VMware workstation or server giving that address, that's different than some DHCP server that you don't control giving you an RFC 1918 address. But anyway, I'm going to drop there. Been on a bit now. Hopefully that was useful. I have no idea what kind of feedback I'm going to get on this one, but we'll find out. And if it goes well, I will do the next session in the series, and we'll continue on to talk about encryption and looking at the marketplaces and stuff like that. But thanks for those of you that joined. I appreciate it.